After years of working in the private sector, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of former President Donald Trump, spent 4 years in Washington working as a senior advisor to the president. He joined me in studio to talk about his new book, Breaking History, where he goes through his time at the White House. He talks about his famous father-in-law and everything in between. All right, we are joined by Jared Kushner, a former senior White House advisor during the Trump years, author of the new book, Breaking History, a White House memoir. Jared, it's a fantastic book. I enjoyed it, read it very quickly. It reads quickly. And what I found most interesting about this book, and it happens immediately, people don't know much about Jared Kushner. You were sort of behind the scenes in a family where that's not always easy, and you share a lot about yourself. How tough was that?
It wasn't hard to share about myself. I just never really had a reason to share information before. And so doing the book project gave me the opportunity to put down some of my experiences. But it has been interesting to watch everyone project things on me or say who I was or wasn't. But I spent time during my time in the public eye in Washington working on getting things done as opposed to trying to be part of that conversation.
I thought this was really interesting. One section of the book, you actually say that you weren't totally sold on Donald Trump as a candidate back in 2016. Now, you say you love your father-in-law, you respected him, but you weren't sold until you went to a rally. What happened? What changed?
Yeah, I wouldn't say not sold on his viability. I just didn't know what to make of it. So the story I tell in the book is about how I'm seeing everything that was happening was distorted, right? In the sense that, Donald Trump makes his announcement, the media is running Don Voyage, he's going to be out.
Right.
And then basically what happens is the next thing you know, he's rising in the polls. And so everything was counterintuitive. I was here on the Upper East Side in what I thought was a very diverse group of people. I was with the heads of the banks, the heads of the fashion, the heads of the technology companies, heads of the media. And they're all saying Donald has no chance, but then the polls are going. So Donald says to me, why don't you come join me on one of my rallies? And I said, sounds interesting, right? You always have to find your truths with your own eyes. We go out to Springfield, Illinois, and he goes to a convention center. They walk in. He says, congratulations, sir. You just broke the attendance record for this convention center. And he says, well, who had it? He says, it was 36 years ago, Elton John. And he turns to me and says, Jared, see, I don't even have a guitar. And so he gets on stage and he's just, riffing, and he doesn't have a prepared speech. And nobody knew who I was. I was walking around the crowd, meeting people. It was old, young, white, black, male, female. And what I saw was that the way that they responded to his issues, he was, against Common Core, he was against the trade deals, that all of the people I knew on the Upper East Side were for.
Right.
And it gave me kind of the intuition to then say, I should be exploring these things further. And I saw more and more that he was right and they were wrong, and that what I thought was a worldly diverse crowd was actually an echo chamber where they were just talking to each other.
And you're data-driven. So you probably looked into that. Have you gone to any of his rallies since he's left office?
I haven't since left office, but I went to a ton during the time in office. And I have to say, his rallies are one of my favorite parts of the whole political experience.
You might get the same feeling that you got back in 2016 going to his post-presidential rallies.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of them on Rumble, and I've seen him in that regard. But,
right.
But again, he's an amazing performer. And by the way, that's where he does his polls. He connects with the audience. He tries out different policies, different things. He sees how people react. And he really tries to get information from the people when he's at his rallies.
Did he really feel bad for Hillary Clinton after beating her in 2016? There's a section in the book where you sort of hint that that was the case, that maybe he was going to invite Hillary Clinton to the White House for dinner. They, of course, there's been many lives to Donald Trump, not just a former Republican president, but he was a television star. He was a Democrat for a long time. He was friends with the Clintons. They were at Donald Trump's wedding to your mother-in-law. What did you make of that?
So, again, I try to show this in the book, and Donald doesn't even like to show this himself, but he does have a lot of empathy. There's one scene in particular that I show in the book where, flying back from North Korea, he actually called the parents of Otto Warmbinger, the gentleman who was basically beaten to death in a North Korean prison, and basically says to them, look, I just want you to know I was thinking about you and about Otto when I was holding hands with Kim Jong-un and having these discussions. I really want to make this deal for humanity. I've got to de-escalate tension, but I know it's hard for you to see that. Come to the White House. Let's spend some time together, and I'm thinking about you. Same thing with Hillary. Like, I think that he saw that, she'd kind of geared up, many years of her life to get to that position. He saw how despondent all of her supporters were on election night. The original speech that we had for the victory was actually, that Stephen Miller wrote, was much more... There was a speech that was written? Kind of.
Yeah,
but the draft that he got, he looked at and said, that's not the right sentiment.
Were you surprised that night?
I wasn't surprised, but we kind of built the campaign to get to goal line plus an inch, so none of us thought what would happen after. And there's a funny story I tell in the book where I promised Donald that I would call him the second I got the exit polls. David Bossie, who was a great colleague on the campaign, gives me the exits, and they were a disaster. They showed that he basically lost by a landslide. I call him. I say, I got the polls. Stepien thinks the methodologies are wrong. They're not great.
Right.
Your people vote late. They have jobs.
Right.
And I basically take him through them. And he says, well, I just have to say, very proud of the job we did, proud of myself. We left it all on the field. We'll see what happens. I basically told him he lost the election. And then later that night, we found out the data was going more like our models. The polls were all wrong. And I think we believed we can do it, but we never thought what would happen if we did do it. And so it was just a very surreal experience. And it really was a ragtag campaign. And actually, one thing that night after we got those polls is Boris Epstein, started booking Don, Ivanka, Eric, and Rudy, who were the only surrogates he had on the first campaign. Right? It was a family campaign. He didn't have all the politicians on drive time radio, and they were just calling into every radio station they could to say, "Get out of vote, get out of vote, get out of vote." Right. And it was really a wild experience.
That was quite a night for America. Later today, this judge in Florida, the same judge that signed this warrant for the raid at Mar-a-Lago, is going to release, we think, a heavily, aggressively redacted version of this affidavit. What's the concern that Donald Trump is ultimately indicted and possibly faces charges for something?
So this isn't a new concern for us, right? Ever since Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, the FBI spied on our campaign. I write about it in the book, what it was like for 2 years to be under investigation.
You said your mom called you after the Russia hoax and said, have you been colluding with Russia?
No, literally, she's reading articles online. Chuck Schumer and my parents, they used to be friends when we were Democrats, and he's going around the Upper East Side telling everybody that I'm going to be indicted and I'm going to go to prison because I colluded with Russia, which was crazy. And so we knew that it wasn't true. But
Did she call you after the raid?
No, not after the raid. Okay. No, but bottom line here is I write in the book what it was like in the White House enduring the investigations, the impeachments, the media attack, but simultaneously how President Trump, under all this pressure, and how how he got so many things done, how he was able to get the economy going, the wealth gap was shrinking, inflation was low, wages were rising, gas prices were low, and he was making trade deals. There was peace in the world. There was no war with Russia. China was on its back foot. And again, President Trump was able to get all that done. And that was the environment I tried to recreate in the book. And so I think what you're seeing now, it's just more of them trying to get Trump. First they promised he was a Russian spy, and now they're going after paperwork. So it seems like they
letters
just
from Kim Jong-un. He can't have these. These are things he can't have. I'm joking. These are things that I think make a lot of sense for a library. So we'll hopefully find out more today. You have this section in the book, and I think it connects to the Abraham Accords and some of the work that you did on criminal justice reform, something I know you're passionate about. But when you first got to the White House, a lot of the concern was, okay, how do we please the media? Maybe please is the wrong word, but we're supposed to be in this honeymoon phase. That never happened. And in a way, you say that was liberating, and you were then able to accomplish things like the Abraham Accords. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I think that in the beginning, we got off on the wrong foot with the media for whatever reason, and it basically just made us said, let's not play for their rules. Let's just focus on what are President Trump's promises to the American people. Let's develop policies. Let's just execute them. And then for the Abraham Accords, it's a great example. And again, I write about in the book extensively about how I spent the first year really listening to all the leaders in the Middle East. I take you inside the palaces and inside the meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, the way we were navigating through even the deep state in our own government, how we were fighting to get our first trip done to Saudi Arabia. I take you in the Situation Room.
With the Crown Prince.
Yeah.
No fist pump.
No.
There.
And basically what I was trying to show is for 3 years, we were criticized by the media and all of the experts who had failed on doing this before us. And then finally, with about 6 months to go, we were able to get the first breakthrough, the first peace deal in over 40 years there. And then we got the second peace deal and the third peace deal. And we finally ended up getting 6 peace deals in the last 6 months. And again, this was just because President Trump was an outsider. He thought like a businessman. We were results driven, and we did things differently. But we didn't care about all the criticism that was coming in because they were criticizing us for being different than Washington politicians. But what we ended up doing is we got different results than Washington politicians. And that's what I really want people to understand from the book, because the media wasn't really interested in telling that story.
Donald Trump's last day in office, gas is at $2.39. Inflation is at 1.4%. It's 8.5% right now. The proof's in the pudding. The results were there. The media doesn't seem to care about that. Why do you think that is?
I just saw this time and time again. I don't know. Why did they think that we colluded with Russia? I mean, why they couldn't accept the fact that voters in America liked President Trump's message, resented the elite class that they were a part of, and they wanted to send somebody else there.
Is there a war in Ukraine if Donald Trump's still president?
0%.
Is China thinking about invading Taiwan?
0%.
Are we looking at the Iran nuclear deal yet again?
I think you would have a deal with Iran, but it would be a real deal where they would, be denuclearizing, and you would have no problems, and you'd be harmonizing the region. The architecture of the foreign policy that we tried to do in the Middle East, and again, it wasn't left or right, it was just common sense, it was pragmatism, was we were figuring out how can we get from Haifa in Israel to Muscat in Oman, create an arc of security, and then stimulate trade and connectivity between all of those people. And then over time, hopefully the Iranian leadership, I believe that the job of a leadership of a country is to provide security and then economic opportunity. Hopefully they would see that this is the right way to go, stop all of the death to America nonsense, death to Israel nonsense, and come on board and be a part of a greater economic experiment that was lifting a lot of people up. And
Absolutely.
I think the Abraham Accords made that possible. And again, there was great momentum when we left, and it's been totally squandered since then.
Couple quick ones, just while I have you. Donald Trump's best poll numbers came right before COVID-19. It was that winter of 2020 before COVID hit here. Really, March 2020 is when that became an issue for us here in the U.S. Does Donald Trump win in 2020 if there's no COVID-19?
By a landslide.
Okay. Dr. Anthony Fauci, in your book you say that you were in his office. I believe it was his office, and Jim Acosta called, and Fauci took the call. Tell me about that.
Yeah, he actually came up on his phone and he just turned the phone over. We both kind of pretended.
So was
like
Fauci the one that was, because it always seemed like the media had a step up on the administration when it comes to...
He did a lot of talking to the media, and that was one of the biggest disappointments, right? Because in that time, it was about the country. It wasn't about red team or blue team. It was about how do we do what we need to save lives, get people the care they need, make decisions. And it created a lot of misinformation. And one example I give is that, so testing was something that we had to ramp up. Again, he was the leading infectious disease expert in our country, but we didn't have enough supplies to do the testing. And I always say to solve a big problem, there's three components. There's imagination, there's gravity, and there's money, right? We had a great plan. We had endless funds, so money was an issue. And it was just basically about ramping up swabs. So we only had 1.2 million swabs in the country. To do all this testing, you basically needed more Q-tips. So we work with U.S. Cotton. We're doing Defense Production Act. Dr. Fauci goes on television, instead of saying, we have a great plan, we're doing everything we can do, it's going to be going faster, we see relief in sight. He gets up and he says, we're just not there yet. And people on the team are very discouraged.
Why did you say that during the meeting?
Well, they're saying, you've been in the task force since day one. What are you, a sportscaster? Or are you, are you part of the team? If you're part of the team, explain where we are. And there's just a lot of messaging that he did. And I tell a lot of stories to him and Donald Trump where I showed the difference in their personalities and how, quite frankly, there were some elements that he gave that were scientifically helpful.
Was Donald Trump ever close to firing him?
You never really know, because there's always rumors one way or the other. And I always say with him, unless he pulls the trigger, you don't know how close he
Final
really is.
question. We need more people from the private sector working in politics, like yourself. The best and the brightest are not in Washington. They're in the private sector. Does this book have a sequel?
No,
Would you get back into politics?
I really hope not. I mean, I think that if you read the book, you'll see that it was a very, very hard time. You're on call 24/7. What I'm enjoying now is I love being with my children. I love being in the private sector. But I do believe our founding fathers, when they designed our system, they wanted people to leave their farm, go and serve, go back to their farm. Again, I'm not a farmer, but I think that that's what they wanted. They don't want this career political class. And I do hope my book not only encourages people from the private sector to go and serve in government, but also it gives them hopefully a guide on what they're going to face and how to be better prepared than I was. And hopefully it allows them to achieve even bigger successes than we were able to achieve.
Jared Kushner, thanks so much for your time. The book is Breaking History, a White House memoir. Really enjoyed it. Jared, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Great.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you.